We begin today's show in Gaza, where Israel last night ordered the evacuation within 24 hours of all Palestinians living in the northern Gaza Strip, some 1.1 million people within 24 hours. The United Nations has condemned the order, saying it's, quote, impossible for such a movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences, unquote. Much of Gaza is already in the dark as Israel's cut off energy, food and water supplies. The 7-day Israeli bombardment has killed at least 1,500 Palestinians. Israel declared war after Saturday's surprise, brutal attack by Hamas militants on Israel, where the death toll has reached 1,300. Israel's now amassing tanks on the border of Gaza ahead of what appears to be an imminent ground invasion. Some 400,000 Palestinians had already been displaced prior to Israel's evacuation order last night. Some groups have announced plans to defy Israel's order. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society said, quote, despite the occupation's threats to shell, the decision has been made. We did and will not leave. Our medics will carry on their humanitarian duties. We won't leave people face death alone, unquote. Many in Gaza fear Israel's evacuation order is the start of a second Nakba. 75 years ago, in 1948, some 700,000 Palestinians fled from or were violently expelled from their homes upon Israel's founding in 1948. Much of Gaza's population are refugees from families displaced 75 years ago. We begin today's show with Muhammad Shehada, a writer and analyst from Gaza, chief communications at Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor, columnist at the Forward newspaper, a Jewish weekly in New York. He's joining us from Copenhagen. Mohammed, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you describe what's happening on the ground and first respond to this order from the Israeli government that half the population of Gaza, 1.1 million people, must leave the north and head south, and they gave them 24 hours last night to do it?
Yes, thanks, Amy. I've been through at least 6 Israeli military operations or even more. This is like nothing I've ever seen in my entire life and nothing like Gaza has ever seen in terms of magnitude, scale, level of destruction and death. Entire neighborhoods are totally unrecognizable. With the evacuation orders, it's basically plain and very obvious forcible transfers. And it's most important thing about it is that it's unimplementable. If you know Gaza geographically and physically and the devastation of infrastructure there, you would know that most roads are broken. There's vast electricity, internet outages. People are not getting any news. At the same time, the area that Israel wants people to go out of is the most densely populated part of Gaza and the area with the most safe shelters, these UN schools, although not very safe because Israel bombed a lot of them over the last 6 days. But it's the area with the most UN schools. It's the area with the most hospitals. And right now you have over 7,000 Palestinians wounded in Al-Shifa hospital and other hospitals around Gaza, around the area that Israel wants them to evacuate from. So by the mere act of evacuation, many people are going to lose their lives. The other issue is that there are not enough houses, not enough spaces or shelter in the south of Gaza that Israel wants to push people towards to be in. The only realistic outcome of this is that we're going to have people just literally baking in the sun in 30 degrees Celsius temperature, about 85 degrees Fahrenheit, daily in the sun, in the street, without any access to hospitals, any access to food or water, let alone the sheer terror of Palestinians experiencing a second Nakba. Many people there are saying we're not leaving our homes. The Palestinian Red Crescent said we refuse to evacuate because we're not going to let our people face death alone. At the same time, I'm aware that there is some pressure from European officials and the Israeli government discreetly to sort of backtrack this decision, but they are telling me quite obviously that it's unlikely they would have much influence on Israel without the US coming on board. And until now, the Biden administration hasn't made its mind up about an event that's way, way more horrendous than the Palestinian Nakba. You're talking almost about double the amount of Palestinians that were displaced in 1948, just gone in 24 hours.
We've been trying to reach guests in Gaza, and we're not able to make any connection at this point. Muhammad Shehada, if you could explain more the conditions on the ground and the significance, as I listened last night to the general director of the Palestine Red Crescent Society say, how do we move people out of hospitals with this short amount of time, not to mention more than 1 million people?
Yes, so before the evacuation orders, almost everyone I know in Gaza, they say our knees cannot lift us up. They haven't had any sleep for more than 2 to 3 hours a night, punctuated by constant military airstrikes, because Israel dropped up until yesterday about 6,000 bombs on Gaza in 6 days. That's about a bomb every 1.5 minutes. Every single neighborhood in Gaza was damaged. Every single street area, all the famous sites are completely gone. Pulverized. At the same time, the last time I talked to people was this morning. I talked to at least 2 to 3 people, and I lost them as I was talking with them on the line because of airstrikes or running out of electricity and internet. Israel bombed Gaza's main telecommunication company on the 3rd or 4th day of this escalation, bombed it completely, leading to outages in vast areas of Gaza. And the last time I talked to someone, the last one I spoke to is a Gazan Irish citizen. He holds Irish citizenship, European. And he was telling me basically this: I only have a few liters of water in my home for a family of 6. I don't know where am I going to go. I have a few batteries and they're running out of power. And he doesn't know if he's going to stay alive. Most people I know in Gaza are literally uploading their wills and last words to their social media accounts and begging for forgiveness from anyone that they've ever wronged or done anything to, and saying, please forgive us and we forgive you as well. This is what it has come down to.
Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett exploded at a Sky News anchor, Kamali Melbourne, during an interview Thursday after Melbourne pressed Bennett on Israel's attacks on Palestinian civilians. Here's a portion of the exchange.
What about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support, and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis. We don't target them. Now, the world can come and bring them anything they want. If you want to bring them electricity, I'm not going to feed electricity or water to my enemies. If anyone else wants, that's fine. We're not responsible for them.
This is the point.
But you
this
keep
is the
on.
point.
I want to tell you. No, listen. You listen to me right now. I've heard you enough.
No, I understand. We're trying to have a conversation here. Listen, this is my program. This is my show, and I am asking the questions. You're raising your voice, and I've asked you, and we've already stopped. Please, and let me finish. We've already distinguished between Hamas.
I want to tell you, shame on you.
You're trying to speak over me.
We are not. Shame on you.
It's nothing about shame. We're trying to have a conversation about a very serious situation here, and you are refusing to address it.
That's Sky News anchor Melbourne challenging the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who said to him, "You're daring to ask me about Palestinian civilians?" Muhammad Shehada, your response.
Well, I'm afraid that this is now becoming a mainstream sentiment in Israel, and not just in Israel, amongst official European and American leaders. And in the media as well. If you've been looking at what Israeli politicians are saying, about 2 days ago, an Israeli lawmaker, senior one in the ruling coalition, Limor Son-Harmelech, she wrote on Twitter saying, quote, "There are no innocents in Gaza, flatten Gaza," quite literally, very openly. Now we have the architect, the godfather of the Israeli judicial coup or judicial overhaul, Simcha Rotman. He's now saying that the main goal of this operation is that a Jewish kid can walk freely in Gaza alone, if there would be a Gaza at all. So this sentiment is shared widely. But what I find most striking are 2 things. Number one, European diplomats in the occupied territories are telling me that their leaders, their bosses, their foreign ministries, for the last at least 5 to 6 days, were not bringing Gaza up to their Israeli counterparts at all. That's the same with the U.S. government. They're not bringing what Israel's conduct in Gaza at all, aside from the issue of the humanitarian corridor. This might change now with the forcible transfer of 1.1 million people, but at the same time, this level of complicitness I've never seen before. And it's the same with mainstream media. I've seen circulation of allegations that were completely debunked of extreme, horrendous atrocities like mass rapes and decapitation of babies being taken at face value by virtually all the mainstream media, circulating immediately and without the slightest work of journalistic integrity or investigation, although it was later debunked. And at the same time, when we have Human Rights Watch coming out yesterday and saying we have solid evidence of Israel using phosphorus munition on Gaza's civilian population, that's a chemical incendiary weapon that burns on immediate and ignites on immediate impact with oxygen, and it burns flesh and bone, and it cannot be turned off, and the toxic fumes of it can be lethal and can cause permanent respiratory damage. Human Rights Watch says Israel is using it. This is a war crime, and virtually not a single mainstream media is picking up and reporting on this. So it's unimaginable, the level of complicitness that I see in this round of escalation. Nobody is calling for de-escalation or ceasefire, not even a humanitarian ceasefire, although they did that in the last major war on Gaza 2014. That was the United Nations and the US. They had a humanitarian ceasefire for 72 hours. But this time there's not even any talk about it, not even a thought for it. And that I find most frightening. I get a lot of questions from my colleagues, family, and people I love in Gaza asking, are we going to stay alive? One of my friends, she says, I just gave birth about a month ago. My baby is clinging to me. I'm afraid if he's going to die from a heart attack from the airstrikes and fear and terror. At the same time that she's afraid that her husband might get killed or taken away from her if there is a ground invasion. At the same time that she's afraid that she's going to end up permanently a refugee in the Sinai Desert. These things are unimaginable horrors that are inflicted on Gaza right now with no one intervening to stop it. This is pure madness.
On CNN last night, his former military Israeli analyst said our goal isn't turning Gaza City into a parking lot. Our goal is to turn Gaza into a Hamas-less region. Muhammad Shehada, if you can respond in this last answer.
Yeah, exactly. As I said, Israeli leaders, politicians, and members of the ruling coalition are openly admitting that the goal is flattening Gaza. Simcha Rotman, that's, as I said, he is the architect, the chief architect of the Israeli judicial overhaul. He's one of the top lawmakers in the Israeli ruling coalition. And he's saying openly, the goal is that a Jewish Israeli kid can walk in and out freely if there would be a Gaza at all. He's admitting it very openly. And I've seen the sentiment not just from Israeli politicians, but from Israeli media as well, from Israeli pundits, analysts, and commentators. Voices of reason in Israel are now becoming a shunned minority. Many of them are afraid to speak up because now the atmosphere is so hostile, so polarized and toxic and dehumanizing for people in Gaza that whenever Gaza is brought up, the only thing that's brought up with it is Nazis. Can you imagine if any person in Gaza would refer to Israel as such, how many condemnations would be poured on their heads immediately?
Muhammad Shehada, I want to thank you so much for being with us, usually based in Palestine, in Gaza, writer and analyst, chief communications at Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor, columnist for the Forward newspaper, Jewish Weekly here in New York.